So my final presentation is on the hurricanes of Puerto Rico, the statistics on how its aftermath shaped the island. So what are the hurricanes of Puerto Rico? There are three that I will be highlighting in my presentation, starting with Hurricane Irma that occurred during the summer of 2017, Hurricane Fiona that occurred during early fall of 2017, and then Hurricane Maria that occurred during like mid-fall of 2017. Starting off with Hurricane Irma. So what is it? Hurricane Irma is classified as being a Category 5 hurricane, consisting of life-threatening winds, massive storm surges, and a host of rainfall damage. It traveled at 177 miles per hour, and it was declared as a state of emergency shortly after its initial hit, which that is a common occurrence with like all the other hurricanes that I'll be highlighting. It happened between August and September of 2017. Hurricane Irma initiated its path of destruction from Florida, Cuba, and then all throughout the Caribbean, including the island of Puerto Rico. The next slide depicts a map of the hurricane, including a list of which countries and islands were affected, one being Puerto Rico. And then how did it affect Puerto Rico? Hurricane Irma, although it avoided a direct hit towards the island, it still caused the island massive power outages. Many lives and homes were lost, and the aftermath of the hurricane still affects the island to this day. And this was the first hurricane that kind of just initiated like all the negative occurrences that would happen towards the island later on, like because the impact that this hurricane left on Puerto Rico influenced how other hurricanes in the future would impact the island. And then yeah, this is like a map of Irma's path of destruction towards the Caribbean. And then these are kind of just like a list of like other countries and islands, like how they were affected. Like you can see Puerto Rico, it avoided a direct hit, but like its high winds caused major power outages. You see it, other countries like Cuba, it hit by strong winds and rain. There were some floods, Turks and Caicos, etc., etc. And then Hurricane Fiona was a storm of Category 5. The number isn't exact. It's between 3 and anything higher. It initially occurred east of the Bahamas. After hitting Puerto Rico intensely, Hurricane Fiona, after hitting Puerto Rico intensely, Hurricane Fiona's tropical storm conditions reached portions of the Dominican Republic. It occurred during early fall of 2017. Hurricane Fiona laid landfall along the extreme southwestern coast of Puerto Rico near Punta Tocon, which is like another island, and then like within Puerto Rico, and then with winds of 85 miles per hour, the hurricane caused catastrophic flooding just hours before its initial hit. It caused 12 to 18 inches of rain, and a flash flood emergency was issued shortly after from Sector San Felipe and Mosquito in Salinas County, which is like police county, sort of, shortly after. Hurricane Fiona created immense flooding and intense power outages for the towns and homes of Puerto Rico. Many lives and homes were lost, and the aftermath of the hurricane still affects the island to this day. So then we have Hurricane Maria, which was the most impactful hurricane of Puerto Rico. Like many of you have probably heard it. Hurricane Maria made its first landfall of the Caribbean island nation of Dominica on Monday, September 18th, as a Category 5 storm with winds topping over 160 miles per hour, the strongest hurricane on record to make landfall there. Days later, the storm devastated the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico. This happened during late fall of 2017. Hurricane Maria created immense flooding and intense power outages for towns and homes of Puerto Rico. Like all the other hurricanes before, many lives and homes were lost, and the aftermath of the hurricane still affects the island to this day. This hurricane affected Puerto Rico because there's a typo, but Hurricane Maria was the first Category 4 hurricane to directly impact Puerto Rico in 85 years. Nearly the entire population of Puerto Rico, more than 3 million American citizens, became without electricity in Puerto Rico nearly a week after Maria made landfall on Wednesday, September 20th. There was like an estimated 4 to 6 months until power would be restored. US president at the time, Donald Trump, was supposed to give out relief money, but then never followed through with it, which is something that we will also be talking about in my presentation. So now we will be going over how all of these hurricanes individually and as a whole shaped Puerto Rico. We will be highlighting statistics on the aftermath of the hurricane, specifically the gentrification that occurred towards the island after the hurricanes, and just overall like what people can do to help today's Puerto Rico, whether it's like donations or like resources or organizations to learn more about. Those are all things that we will be highlighting. And then this is just kind of like an overview. We'll go over Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Fiona, Hurricane Maria, and then like how the hurricanes posed a massive threat to both the land of Puerto Rico and its people. And then statistics on the aftermath of the hurricanes. For Hurricane Irma, 6 million people were left without power and evacuated Florida. Hurricane Irma hit Florida as a Category 4 storm the morning of September 10th, 2017, ripping off roofs, flooding coastal cities, etc. Like how Florida was impacted, Puerto Rico was impacted similarly as well. And then Irma was the 5th costliest hurricane, meaning like it was the 5th hurricane to ever exist that costed like the most money to obtain relief money, if that makes sense. And that statement was according to the National Hurricane Center, and it's like they estimated it to be like around 50 billion to repair damage, and then nearly 130 people died as a result of nearly 130 people died as a result of Hurricane Irma. This hurricane was responsible for 42 deaths, and then another 82 was attributed added in after how the hurricane impacted Florida. And then for Hurricane Fiona, 1.5 million people were left without power in Puerto Rico. 376,000 of them had power restored later on, but then 80% of people still remained without power even after that. And then only 34% of households in Puerto Rico had portable water after rivers grew, and heavy rainfall impacted the system, meaning more than 834,000 people were still either didn't have access to water to drink any water, or they did have access to water, but it was contaminated and it wasn't healthy to drink. And then more than 1,000 people had been rescued by authorities, including one incident that happened was that a woman was rescued that Sunday. She was stuck under a tree for 7 hours after trying to look at the damage. I think the tree hit her car. I'm not really sure, but there was another famous bridge in Puerto Rico. I forgot the name of it, but it broke down as well, and that was another thing that happened. And then over 30 people died in Puerto Rico as a result of Hurricane Fiona. If we look at all the countries and islands that were impacted from Hurricane Fiona as a whole, that number definitely increases. And then for Hurricane Maria, 96% of people had power restored, but 62,000 of the population still remained without power in Puerto Rico as a result. More than 5,000 people died, and then Puerto Rico had requested 94 billion in hurricane relief money, and then the U.S. agreed to provide them 30 billion, and President Trump said he was going to do that, but then him and his team blocked that action before it ever occurred, meaning they said they would give them the money, but then never did. And there was a whole investigation about it. It was a whole mess. Which to add on, isn't really surprising considering there has been backlash with him in the past about him being racist towards Hispanic people and all that jazz. Threat of Puerto Rico's land gentrification, power outages, and destruction and death. Those are the three main threats that it posed to the land specifically. And then kind of the same thing for how the hurricanes posed a threat to Puerto Rico's population. Gentrification affected them, power outages affected them, destruction and death. Those are all things that affect someone's daily life. And then we will be going over the gentrification of Puerto Rico after the hurricanes. Kind of separated into like three categories. We have the privatization of Puerto Rico's beaches and electricity, how gentrification of Puerto Rico led to the closing of schools and local businesses, and how many people's homes are being transformed into hotels, condos, $1 million businesses, etc. So the privatization of Puerto Rico's agriculture, forgot to edit this. This is a different title than what's on there, but yeah, they privatize Puerto Rico's agriculture, nature, and all that stuff. But we will be highlighting Puerto Rico's beaches and electricity, Puerto Rico's beaches and electricity specifically, and how those two demographics were privatized. By law, all beaches in Puerto Rico must have public access. They've been trying to protect that from taking like a different route. Puerto Rico has been protecting itself against privatization since 1979, but obviously since the hurricanes, there was things changed because of that. In recent years, however, hotels and apartment buildings have set private beachfront areas denying access to the public and forcing many to go through dangerous paths to access the beaches. These developments also have a dangerous environmental impact and increase the cost of living for locals. According to the Puerto Rico Coastal Zone Management Program, development that blocks access to beaches in Puerto Rico is prohibited. And there's many government core papers that show one specific like hotel business. So there's a town in Puerto Rico called Rincon, and there was a hotel business called, they named themselves Rincon Blue Water after like transferring onto Puerto Rico. They acquired a $15 million tax exemption and tax credit to build by the reserve without, they didn't consult the community, they didn't consult anyone about like in a legal sense, and also just like, hey, is it okay if we like build stuff here? And they took like massive advantage of their tax exceptions, and that's also something that we will be talking about later on. A total of 60% of Puerto Ricans live by the coast, so this is, the privatization of the beaches is something that impacted the community really like deeply because most of the population lives by it. And then we have wealthy influencers such as Brock Pierce and Jake Paul, or it's Logan Paul actually. Not sure if his brother has any ties to it, but they moved to Puerto Rico. They bought homes and have been like, they've expressed how they love living by the beach and they want to live by the beach without like having to pay taxes, which affects Puerto Rico even more. And then many civilians are saying that the privatization just overall of Puerto Rico, but just like focusing more on its beaches, it's one of the worst economic recessions that we have seen in a while due to the fiscal and condition and the depth that Puerto Rico is in due to the hurricanes. This causes inflation in rents and the real estate market, meaning most working class people have to work 2 or 3 jobs without benefits in order to survive at the same area. And then electricity wise, companies such as Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, Luma Energy, and then the Federal Emergency Management Agency were all supposed to collaborate in alleviating Puerto Rico's debt and provide hurricane relief in terms of power loss. However, there were just like many complications with this. There was a lot of disagreements about how this should all go about. The governor of Puerto Rico at the time didn't really address this issue and kind of just like pushed it off to the side, like, oh, these companies are handling it, it's fine. Our electric power grid is strong, even though it was basically in shambles and it was being privatized, misused, and without equal access, meaning like the people of Puerto Rico, like there would be one person that had like energy in their home just fine, and then another person wouldn't have that same issue. Luma said, the Luma Energy Company said it had initiated 225 projects with FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, it representing more than under 16 million. It was between 116 million and 5 billion worth of federally funded projects, since it took over management of the grid. In other words, they basically said like, hey, we will do these projects with you, we will collaborate with you, just give us we need this amount of money to make that happen. And then they didn't make it happen. They just kind of took the money for themselves, which obviously created a lot of backlash. And because of this, the frequent power outages continued in April of